Welcome to my site. It is the session with the longest name. Anybody recognize Let Them Eat Cake? Okay. It was a quote that was attributed to Marie Antoinette during the French Revolution. She was told that her peasants, the peasants were starving, they didn't have any bread, and in theory, what she said was, well, for heaven's sakes, let them eat cake. And historians pretty much are in agreement that that was an early version of fake news. That did not happen. My name is Deb Vail. I work for Heartland AEA as an instructional technology consultant. And this is kind of my new passion. Some really fabulous stuff out there available, lots of great pathways to engage kids in this conversation. Pretty much what we're going to hit on is what is information or media literacy and what kinds of resources can I use to teach this. Prior to the internet, anybody recognize the guy on the right? As old as I am, there's good old Walter Cronkite. And how many of you had a set of encyclopedias on the bookcase? Yes, yes. And that was what we relied on. The content was produced by experts. It was reviewed by experts. And then came the internet. Information landscape radically changed. Radically. Anybody can post to the web. Experts, non-experts, and some of it looks very polished, some not so much. I have a fair number of things that I've published on the web. Didn't have to take a driver's test, didn't have to do anything. Nobody fact-checked any of my stuff. And we kind of have this problem. There is so much information. How do we sort through it all to find the things that are worthwhile? I love this picture. Despite this stream of stuff coming out of her computer, look at her posture. I love this. I love this. Here are just a few examples of real fake news. How many of you heard about the Pope endorsing Trump, right? Right? This one, the one in the middle at the top, I hadn't heard of. Flight crew takes a knee and walks off the flight, leaving the New Orleans Saints stranded on the runway. Didn't happen. Not true. This is an interesting one on the right. A destroyer apparently during Hurricane Harvey got loose and went down and took down some buildings in downtown Houston. Didn't happen. This is the latest, one of my absolute favorites. Melania Trump hired an exorcist to cleanse the White House of Obama demons. Do you kind of feel like you need this? I mean, personally, I do. And I'm more savvy than typical students. But especially now, I feel like I need tools. These are the kind of the high points of what I see information literacy. There are other things, but these are the big kinds of skills that we need to navigate this massive amount of information. And kids need it as well. Digital natives. We assume, they've got their faces down in their devices and they know social media. We assume that they're pretty skilled with the internet in general. Sam Weinberg did a study through Stanford University, 18 months, 7,800 students, middle school, high school, and college. How many of you are familiar with this study? Yeah. This is a quote from the summary. Their ability to reason about the information online is bleak. For example, 82% of the middle school students couldn't tell an ad that was labeled sponsored content from the real thing. That's terrifying. But how many of you sort down through a website and you have a hard time figuring out where did that article go, right? Through all of the nonsense that's also on the page. I think our kids could probably wrestle with this and come out okay, right? There's no gray area here. This is meant to be humorous, right? But we get into, I apologize, this isn't the greatest graphic, but what I want you to see is false and then harmful. And where those two meet in the middle is kind of an awful place. And there's a lot of awful, deceptive stuff out there that is intended to be harmful, to deceive people with kind of a nefarious intent. Let me give you an example. Here are some headlines. These came out in February, same month as the Parkland shooting, okay? And I remember hearing this and thinking, 18 school shootings in the first 2 months of 2018? How could I have missed these? But I didn't dig deeper. How did I miss these should have been sirens going off. Go fact check it, Deb. But if you notice, top left, it was shared in India as well. So around the world. Okay, if I had gone to everytownresearch.org to look at the data, I don't know if you can see it clearly. This one right here, January 13th, a man committed suicide in the parking lot. No one else was involved, and the school had not been open as a school for more than 6 months. But that data got included in these horrible school shootings. And the rest of those, or several of those, are very much like that. Okay, why did everytownresearch.org share out that there had been 18 school shootings? Talk to me about it. What's their agenda?
More people that click on their website.
Get people wound up about what topic? We've got to control these guns, right? You can tell, okay? Why did the newspapers pass it along? Only 2 reasons I can think of. Say that again? Okay, yeah. Maybe they didn't fact check it. Maybe they saw this quick headline, ran with it. Boy, I hope that's not the case. But the other one I see is maybe it fit their agenda. Politically, they kind of liked this information. It supported what they knew to be true. So let's share it. Here's an interesting thing. Daily World Update bills itself as a satirical website. And if you go to their website, you're going to see this at the bottom. The problem is, when you share it on Facebook, that disclaimer doesn't move over. You have to go back to the original site. So now, Sessions begins detaining Jews at the border. And I hate to tell you, there's some pretty amazing research that says, folks, they read the title, the headline, maybe the first paragraph, and then they share. Okay? So this takes on a whole life of its own without the satirical context. Okay? How many of you have seen some outlandish stuff in your Facebook feed? It's so easy. Social media really ramps up this issue. And if it's shared by a friend, then it's got to be true, right? It gives it greater credibility than it should. This is not showing up real well. A teacher shared this website with me. She said that she had some kids that were doing some research. One student in particular, she read his rough draft and thought, dear God, where did he get his information? And so she asked him to share. He said he got it from www.martinlutherking.org. Okay? This website is no longer there. They've taken it down. But if you do a domain search, you find that it's a white supremacist website. And I meant to have the link on there. I'm not sure what happened to it. But you do a domain search, and you can find out who registered it. not only who registered it, Don Black, but his email, what other websites he has created or his organization has created. Kids should be doing this. We should be doing this. When sirens go off, go check. So a domain registration search is super easy to do. And I'll drop that link in there. I'm not sure how it ended up here. Okay? That siren process, if it appeals to your emotions, those sirens better be going off. Anybody hear about this one? Emma Gonzalez, right? That student that was kind of one of the spokespeople for the Parkland, Florida shooting. Okay? And look at this tweet. Proudly shredding the Constitution. Oh, any American is just furious at this, right? Well, she was tearing up a body target in this photo. It was photoshopped to show her tearing up the Constitution, to rile people up. How many of you have ever done a reverse image search? Wow, this is really powerful. If you do a reverse image search, it will search for other examples of that photo, and you can fact check your photo.
I'm sorry.
Here's another one. This one is a real photo, but the context is wrong. Okay, so it's Black Lives Matter thugs block Texas rescue efforts to protest Trump, immediately regret it. So basically, they're doing this line on the highway so that resources can't get to the Harvey hurricane folks. They're blocking traffic, okay? Okay, that's not it. They took a photo from 2015. Harvey was 2017. They took a photo, Boston protesters against racism, and they were standing across the highway then, but why not get people wound up about Black Lives Matter? If you want to fact check images, if you're on a Chrome browser, it has to be a web-based image, but if you right-click on the image, search Google for images, and it'll do a quick reverse image search. And you can go back and find that this was 2017, Hurricane Harvey. But when you fact check it, you can go back and see that that photograph occurred long before Hurricane Harvey. So right-click on your Chrome browser. Here's a quick video. I'm not going to show it on how to do a reverse image search, so that's in there. You can also take a screenshot and then drag it, your screenshot, from your desktop onto that website. And this is what a reverse image search will look like. Up here at the top, here's the one I submitted, the reverse image search. Visually similar images, and then all down here, and there may be pages. But you can go back and see where else did this image, where else on the internet did it go. You can find out where it started. Anybody do that with students, reverse image search? It's pretty powerful. Also, when you do a reverse image search, you find Snopes has debunked this, and that website comes up. Okay, so collinsdictionary.com, here's the definition of fake news. And as we said before, it's a recently coined phrase, but this concept is not new. This is an important point. I watch every webinar I can, I read every blog I can, I get as much information as I can on this topic. And what they all say is, don't call it fake news. That has a political connotation, and there's not a shared understanding of what does fake news mean. They say, call it information pollution, call it false news, call it junk news, call it anything, but don't call it fake news. It is woefully inadequate to describe the problem. And this is kind of an interesting thing. Tim Dickinson is a columnist, political columnist. Love this. Be specific. Why is it information pollution or misinformation? Be specific. This was kind of a depressing study, very recent one done by MIT, and we're concerned about folks meddling with our election, influencing the information people have, okay? They just did a study, a 10-year study of Twitter posts, and what they found was the false stuff outperforms the true stuff. It spreads farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than anything that's true. Kind of a scary thing. And if you're interested in the study itself, there's a link on that slide. Anybody heard of Macedonia associated with the false news? I'm going to play this video. It's about 4 minutes long. BuzzFeed News uncovered this. Basically, they began tracking false news. They knew it was false. And they began looking, where's this stuff coming from? And it was 150 sites were coming from this little town in Macedonia.
He asked that we keep his identity hidden. So let's call him Dimitri. Just a guy making a living in a small town of Vail, Macedonia.
I wrote that the celebrity wanted to kill Trump. The Queen of England wants to meet Trump. Trump and Putin have a secret meeting in Mexico.
Dimitri is 18 years old, and he says that in the past 6 months, he's made more than $60,000 writing, posting, and sharing fake news articles about the American election. His biggest cash cow?
Make America great again.
Donald Trump.
Trump is a politician just like any other. I think that nothing could beat Trump's supporters when it comes to social media engagement, and that's why we stick to Trump.
In the final 3 months of the presidential campaign, the most viral fake news stories outperformed the most viral real news stories on Facebook, according to a BuzzFeed analysis. Most were pro-Trump. And some 150 fake U.S. politics sites have been traced here to Dimitri's Macedonian hometown. He was willing to lift the veil on his bootstrap operation, which he claims garnered 40 million page views in the past 6 months. To draw readers, his fake stories copy the style of more mainstream organizations, including NBC News.
The Republicans love the veterans. They love the veterans. They respect them, I think, the most of anyone. And what you do is you say, Obama donated $300 million to Hillary Clinton's campaign that he took from the veterans. And people will open them immediately, saying why.
For headlines, he builds on a format that might also be familiar to consumers of traditional news.
The most read news articles are usually the one containing the clickbait words. The clickbait words are, the oh my god, breaking news, wow. If you say, oh my god, new bunch of emails from Hillary got released, people will like to open that because they want to see more.
Really, Dimitri says, the fake news game is pretty straightforward.
You see what people like, and you just give them. If they like, why are you doing water? If they like, why are you doing wine? It's really simple what we do.
Fake news has affected vets. In a country with almost a quarter of its citizens unemployed, and in a town with an average annual income below $5,000, the impulse to deceive was seemingly irresistible. So now, as the money flows, so too does the liquor. This club is cashing in on the success of fake news entrepreneurs. We get paid relatively majestic sums by Macedonian standards by selling advertising on their sites.
What happened in our town is that a lot of money came, and a lot of people quit their jobs so they can put a lot of effort in this. as they saw this as the big ideas, their big chance, their big change in their life.
One venue here even plans to host a club night on the day Google pays out its ad revenue. In response to concerns that fake news may have influenced the election, Google and Facebook recently announced new measures to crack down on sites like Dimitri's. But his Google AdSense account is still up. Besides, Dimitri says, fake news didn't alter the election. And if anyone needs to take responsibility, it's surely not him.
I know who is the responsible one for the election, and that's the American people. I think the American people take their politics not as serious as other countries do. No offense to Americans, but we don't believe such hoax news.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button.
All right. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's see if I can get this to go exit full screen. He doesn't even have a political agenda. It's money. It's all about money. Reload this. And there were lots and lots of folks that were getting in on that. Unfortunately, it's not just in Macedonia or Russia or whatever. We have homegrown sources for this kind of hyper-partisan web news sites. If you're interested, this PBS NewsHour video, it's just under 10 minutes. I didn't want to share the video, it's too long. But in this, PBS interviews Cyrus Masumi, who is one of the most prolific false news outlets, okay? And essentially when they interviewed him, I pulled a couple of quotes, he said, really, I built my first business on the graves of young children who were killed. He was talking about Sandy Hook. That was the event that launched his business. And the PBS interviewer said, you could see the shock on the interviewer's face, and he said, well, so how did you feel about that? I don't know. How do people feel about things they do badly? I feel bad about it, but we do what we do to pay the mortgage, right? It's not even the political agenda. They don't care about the political agenda. He has conservative and liberal sites. It's just to inflame. And he makes money doing it. Let's talk about media bias. This is another big component to information literacy. I'm not wild about this graphic. It comes from the Pew Research. 3/4 of Americans say that news media is biased. Okay, 3/4 of Americans. So how do we sort through this if we feel like it's biased? Trust in mass media. I think it parallels that concern about the biased media. This is a wonderful website. Media Bias Fact Check, and about 4 slides down you'll have all the links to this, okay? This is a website. They have analyzed 2,200 plus media sites for bias, okay? They do not rate the bias of individual articles. They rate the bias of the source itself, okay? Here's the way it looks. But there's also text. There's some really great meat behind this graphic. So at the top, CNN, you can see the yellow dot on the continuum. Breitbart is in the middle. Yellow dot again to indicate where on the spectrum it is. MSNBC. So I just picked a few of them to display. And if you're going to do this with kids, use this resource, I would really have them go into the methodology. There's some great stuff in there. And hopefully your kids are going to say, now wait a minute. Who put these folks in charge? How do we know what they're telling us is true? I would go to that methodology. They really do a nice job explaining. It's very transparent what they do. There's a Chrome extension from these same folks, And if you notice up here, this is the Chrome extension. When I'm in a news article, I get this LC, left center. But then when I tap on it, I get more information. And here's what the way they tell it. Factual reporting, Washington Post, very high. I should say high, they don't say very high. Then they tell you, okay, how did it get left center? They often publish factual information, but they might use inflammatory terms in their article itself or in the headline. They may also choose more liberal topics to report on. But again, what a great source of information. And then down below here is background information on the source itself. I love this. Neat activity for your kids to do. Have them see if they agree with this. Pull it apart, analyze it. This is what the Chrome extension for Facebook looks like. In your feed, you're going to get this. And you can pop it out again and find out the details of why they were given that rating. So online, there's the website there, the Chrome extension, the Facebook Chrome extension, and then there's also a Firefox extension. It's a fabulous resource. Next one, multiple perspectives. Anybody used all sides? Love all sides. Okay, so here's my topic. It was the conversations with the North Koreans. Here's a center article on the topic, a left article on the topic, and here's one that's more conservative. What if kids did Venn diagrams, compare and contrast? What are the platforms of the liberals? What are the platforms of the conservatives? Have them look at inflammatory language. What does it look like? What are circled the terms in there that you feel like go beyond strictly reporting the facts? All sides is fabulous. Here's another one, does the same thing. Blue feed, red feed, created by the Wall Street Journal, and it does side-by-side comparison again. Blue feed, they say, is rated as very liberal, and red feed, very conservative. And again, compare and contrast. Allbridge News is another one. They help you pull apart the different perspectives. And I think it's really important as adults as well as kids. I read stuff that agrees with what I say. Oh, yes, this is truthful because, gosh, it is aligned with my thoughts. On Facebook, my friends are kind of like my views, right? Aren't we? Don't we tend to socialize with people that are similar to us? Folks, we need to hear the other side. We need to be able to hear what other folks are saying and understand it. Fact-checking resources. Anybody use Snopes, Fact Check, PolitiFact? These are great. Now, one thing I will say, recently in the news, folks are saying, these fact-checking things, they're just liberal news sources and yada yada. Have your students check it. Are they only fact-checking claims by conservatives? Don't take it for granted that these are, in fact, neutral. Here's another page of them. One of my absolute favorites, and it's not necessarily because they do a better job, it's the Pinocchios. How many Pinocchio noses did it get? I love that. Currently, I am running a 1-credit license renewal course. Here are some of the comments that past folks have taken. I offered it last summer, currently offering it. I have 2 districts that are interested in me doing a site-based course. We go into so much more depth, the instructional lens, what does it look like, how do you teach this to kids? If you're interested, feel free to contact me. Questions? Are you talking with kids about this? I kind of blasted through. Yeah. Are you talking to kids about it? What do? Share with me any resources that you're using or any conversations you found that work well with students?
We've been using like social media, Instagram and Snapchat, like news sources, and we had a media and then elective that we kind of taught our students, but how it kind of technically
Oh.
to it and the language that we use
Yep.
to determine different sides and whether or not it's purposeful or necessary to use the language that they're using.
Yep. And research says our kids are not on Twitter and Facebook. They are on Instagram and Snapchat. So those are great ways to connect with those kids. I do kind of wonder about how are we going to reach out to these kids? They don't read newspapers. They don't get their news from Facebook. We want them to be socially engaged and civic engaged with civics learning about this kind of stuff. We've got to have conversations with our kids. There is some very nefarious stuff out there, and it's promoted widely. Other thoughts? Yeah.
We just did a session with all of our 7th graders who are doing in social studies. They're getting ready to talk about poverty and doing some research around that. So we adapted a lesson from Museum that has like 5 different headlines, and then they had to go use those resources that you shared to find out if they were fake or not. And we showed them this results from that Stanford study.
Yeah.
Said 80% of you can't tell the difference between sponsored content and regular content. And then Museum has them doing it in a worksheet form, and we just did it in a Google form, so it would give us the percentages right away. And we were able to say, you're proving us right. You didn't do the research, because out of the first 12 of you that submitted, that John Elway fired players for kneeling, only 3 of you got that one right. So it's great to do this type of activity with kids, and unfortunately they prove themselves to be part of that problem.
Yeah. And I really think you can't start at this level with students. You got to go back and display a website that has all kinds of sponsored content, and have them navigate. What is this? Why is this on the page? And have them truly understand. If they don't get what the ads are and can't spot them, boy, we're in trouble. Folks can lead them anywhere they want, We've got to start at really the basics. Another thing, there are all kinds of skills that I teach in my class. Lateral reading, anybody heard about that? The way I used to teach determining credibility of websites is is it a .com, a .edu, and everything I read says stop. Tell them about that, but what do kids do? Oversimplification. Cross off these, and they don't think. An EDU could be a rogue grad student that is just using Stanford University's domain, and they're putting out garbage. One of the things that I start with in my class is 2 truths and a lie. And I tell them 3 things about myself. Only one of them is true. And I start a culture of, okay, you say it's this one. What makes you say that? Everything they say has got to be backed up with evidence that supports an opinion. Anyway, in the lateral read, what I used to do is you look on the website, you go to the About section, right? That's where you'll really figure out if they're knowledgeable. But think about it. We're having them tell us in their About page how credible they are? Maybe not such a good idea. What they say is, get a quick snapshot of what's going on this website and then open another tab and start doing some searching there. Like that video I showed you of Velis, Macedonia. Hopefully they don't take that at face value. If you search Velis, Macedonia, fake news, you're going to get 150 hits because it's corroborated all over the place. Okay? So teach kids to read laterally. Go outside of this and do some research and come back in. Another thing I use, you hate to do checklists because what do students do? Step one, check, did that. They're not thinking, but yeah, I looked at the date to see how recent this resource is, and they just check boxes. Really what we need kids to do is automatically evaluate, analyze, and do this on the fly. They're going to carry that checklist around with them. So we've got to teach them some skills. Start with a framework. There's one called CRAP, C-R-A-P. Credibility, maybe it's currency. Anyway, it has 4 things on it. Start out with that, but get rid of it, because they're not going to laminate that and keep that in their back pocket when they graduate from high school. Teach them some basic things that kind of get them spotting it. One of them is the 2 truths and a lie. Another thing is, do you have an emotional response? Are you outraged by this article? Maybe you ought to do a lateral reading on that. So really, ultimately, we want our students to automatically fact check, evaluate, analyze, and not take things at face value. Other thoughts? Those of you that have done activities with students? There are some fabulous gamified practice. Can you spot the legitimate news story? And it's a game. And get kids dialed in to kind of be detectives, to sniff out the stuff that's no good. Maybe it's a bell ringer when the kids come in the morning. Here's a story. You got 5 minutes in your teams. Decide if this is legit. And we don't want to teach kids that they need to fact check everything. They won't fact check anything if they feel that they have to do it to everything they read. But when those sirens go off, check it and see if it's legitimate.
What is the name of that site? I know I looked at that. You know, like what are the names?
There's factitious. Factitious is one. There is Facebook Hero. Oh my gosh, there are so many. The Annenberg Project has another good one. Anyway, there are tons. I can add those on a reference at the bottom. I'll add it to the last slide. There are tons of them. And students love to, a little bit of competition, you know. I would do it as a bell ringer. Don't give them 30 minutes to investigate it. If we are going to spend 30 minutes investigating it, we're not going to do it. They've got 5 minutes to fact check this. Another thought as you work with students, one of the things when it comes to research is oftentimes it revolves around a final project. And really, the final project becomes the real thing, when maybe we ought to flip it around. What if we build communities that are fact-checking? It's the process. Here's our topic, driverless vehicles. And for homework tonight, you need to find the most credible source you can find. Each team does. And then you have to provide evidence that supports why it's the most credible. Another thought is on a research project, I give you 10 resources, and you have to sort them into, these are the ones I threw out and why, and these are the ones that I kept and why. So I'm going to provide evidence for why I chose those resources. Yeah.
One of the things, you mentioned this earlier, and you just reiterated again just about credible sources. And when we did this in 7th grade, I was really fascinated that, you know, they're not necessarily connected to who a credible source is. So, you know, you mentioned the Craps one, museums was called Escape. It's essentially the same thing. So they had to look at 2 news stories. One was the Samsung brought Apple $5 billion or whatever in nickels, and the other one was the U.S. Navy is using Xbox controllers for ships. that's a real story.
That is a real story.
And I gave him the Engadget website, which,
Yep.
because I like technology, I know that that's a credible source. But we had a number of kids that are like, I've never heard of that. And so they don't know necessarily who is credible. And you even mentioned it with Snopes. We had a girl that said, how do I know this is right? And I'm like, well,
And they
that's
should
fair.
ask that. We
Yeah.
want them to ask
I know, I was proud of her for her
Yeah.
calling me out on it. But that was one thing that was really interesting to me, is they don't necessarily know who the credible sources is. So we had a really good discussion about what it takes to be a credible source. You know, and you know, he said Snopes has been around for a long time, and they have proven over and over again that they are trustworthy with what they're doing. But the Engadget one I really didn't have a great response to, because I was like, well, I know it is because I read it, and they don't lie about it. But
And I think a really good point you could make at that juncture would be to say, you need to read more. You need to be informed. You need to find out what are the sources you can trust. And Vicki, is her last name Davis, Cool Cat teacher, do you know her blog? She was invited by the U.S. Army War College this past summer. The up-and-coming officers meet with civilians who come by invitation, and she was one of the people that came, and it was kind of a think tank kind of opportunity to sit down and talk about defense of our country. And one of the things she came away with was, this is a national security issue. If you're gullible, as an American public, if we are gullible and we're fed this by Macedonia or the local guy out of California, we can be led anywhere. We've got to read the news and pull it apart. And can you tell I'm kind of fired up on this issue? I'm very passionate about it. And I think if we don't help our kids to learn these skills, we're doing them a great disservice. One of the things that Sam Weinberg said, remember that Stanford study, he said schools kind of do kids a disservice. They put filters on, and I'm not slamming filters. I totally get why you put filters on. And I work for Heartland AEA, and we have vetted resources, which is fabulous, but the kids don't get the practice with these sites maybe that they should. One other thought, and then I'm going to let you go. Do you know how to do a custom search engine? Create your own search engine? What happens if you put in, you want to limit maybe what the kids have access to, so you pick 3 non-credible but they're not scary sites, and then you find 3 credible sites and do a custom search engine where when the kids go in and search in what looks like a regular Google search bar, they're only going to search those 3 non-credible and 3 credible that you gave them. I'll drop that in on the last slide. Would that be of interest to how to create a custom search? Anyway, this 50-minute session is just this much. There is so much to this topic. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time. Take care.